Close your eyes and picture life in the 1800s. There are no supermarkets, no fast food, no refrigerators buzzing in the corner. Instead, meals are built from scratch, using what could be hunted, harvested, or preserved through the seasons. Families gathered around wooden tables lit by oil lamps, eating hearty foods that told the story of survival, ingenuity, and community. Some dishes may sound familiar today, while others feel like relics of a distant world. In this video, we will explore 10 foods people ate in the 1800s recipes born from hardship, celebration, and tradition. From simple breads and stews to luxurious Sunday feasts, these foods paint a vivid picture of daily life in the 19th century. 1. Johnnycakes. One of the most common foods of the 1800s was the Johnnycake, a humble cornmeal flatbread that sustained pioneers, farmers, and working families. Made with just cornmeal, water, and a pinch of salt, Johnnycakes were fried on cast iron skillets or baked on hot stones. They were portable, filling, and required no fancy ingredients. Imagine a smoky log cabin on the frontier, the fire crackling, a skillet heating over the embers, the smell of toasted cornmeal filling the air. The taste was simple nutty, slightly sweet if molasses was added, but it was the kind of food that kept you going when there was work to be done. Johnnycakes were more than food, they were survival. 2. Salt pork and beans. Salt pork was one of the most important staples of the 1800s. Pork was salted heavily to preserve it for long stretches, especially on ships, farms, and in military camps. Often it was paired with beans simmered slowly in an iron pot, flavored by the saltiness of the pork and sometimes sweetened with molasses. Picture a pot hanging over the fire, beans bubbling, the smoky, salty aroma filling the kitchen after hours of slow cooking. This was food for laborers, sailors, and soldiers, a dish that could be made with very little and stretched to feed many mouths. In towns like Boston, this evolved into Boston baked beans, which later became a famous regional dish. 3. Venison stew. In rural America, hunting was not sport but survival. Venison deer meat was a common protein, especially in frontier households. Venison stew was cooked with whatever vegetables were available: potatoes, carrots, onions, sometimes turnips. The meat simmered slowly until tender, creating a rich broth that warmed families through harsh winters. Imagine the deep, earthy smell of venison mingling with herbs gathered from the garden, steam rising from a wooden bowl, warming cold hands on a snowy evening. This dish told the story of resourcefulness, of families depending on the land for survival. For a hardtack, if Johnnycakes were the bread of settlers, hardtack was the bread of soldiers and sailors. Made from just flour, water, and salt, hardtack was baked into rock-hard biscuits that could last for months or even years. They were so tough that soldiers often had to soak them in coffee, stew, or water just to take a bite. During the Civil War, hardtack was infamous. Soldiers joked that it could break teeth or that worms sometimes made their homes inside, yet it kept armies fed, and that made it essential. The taste was bland, almost chalky, but in the 1800s, it meant survival on the march. 5. Corn pudding. Corn was central to American life in the 1800s, and one beloved dish was corn pudding, a mixture of corn, eggs, milk, and butter, baked into a golden custard. This was Sunday food, special enough for gatherings, yet simple enough for most families to make. Sweet, creamy, and buttery corn pudding was comfort food long before the phrase existed. Imagine families gathering after church, the pudding steaming as it came out of the oven, the smell of baked corn filling the home. It was a dish that symbolized abundance and hospitality. 6. Mutton with gravy. While beef and pork were common, mutton, the meat of older sheep, was a staple in many 1800s households, especially in rural areas and immigrant communities. Roasted or boiled, often with gravy made from the drippings, mutton had a strong flavor that some loved and others avoided. But it was affordable and nourishing, making it an important protein source. Picture a large wooden table, a platter of mutton at the center, the family carving slices and ladling rich brown gravy over potatoes. It was hearty, sustaining, and deeply tied to the rhythms of farm life. 7. Oyster stew. Surprisingly, oysters were once considered working-class food in the 1800s. They were abundant and cheap. Often sold on street corners or in taverns, One beloved dish was oysters simmered in milk or cream, flavored with butter, pepper, and sometimes celery. Imagine the briny aroma of oysters mingling with cream, served in simple bowls with bread for dipping. It was especially popular during the winter months and on Christmas Eve in many households. Today, oysters are considered a luxury, but in the 1800s, they were everyday fare. 8. Hasty pudding. Another corn-based dish, hasty pudding, was made by boiling cornmeal with water or milk until it thickened into a porridge-like dish. It could be eaten plain, savory with butter and salt, or sweetened with molasses or maple syrup. The name came from its quick preparation compared to other foods. Picture children gathered at the table, each with a bowl of steaming pudding, drizzled with molasses. The smell of sweet corn filling the room. It was simple, nourishing, and beloved across generations. 9. Shoofly pie. Among Pennsylvania Dutch communities, Shoofly pie was a classic 1800s dessert. Made with molasses, flour, and spices, it was sweet, sticky, and comforting. The name supposedly came from the fact that flies loved to hover around its sugary surface while it cooled on windowsills. Imagine a farmhouse kitchen, the smell of cinnamon and molasses wafting through the air, pies cooling on a wooden counter, children sneaking tastes when no one was looking. Shoofly pie was not just dessert, it was heritage. 10. Apple butter and fresh bread. One of the great seasonal traditions of the 1800s was making apple butter. Apples were slow-cooked in large copper kettles with sugar and spices until they transformed into a thick, dark spread. The process often took hours, with families and neighbors gathering to stir the pot together. The result was stored in jars and enjoyed all year on fresh bread. Picture tearing a piece of warm, crusty bread straight from the oven, slathering it with apple butter so fragrant with cinnamon and cloves that the whole room smelled like autumn. This food captured the spirit of community, patience, and celebration of harvest. The foods of the 1800s were more than just meals. They were reflections of life in a world without modern conveniences. Every dish told a story of survival, of making do with what was available, and of turning simple ingredients into nourishment. From hardtack and salt pork that fed soldiers and sailors, to sweet shoofly pie cooling on farmhouse windowsills, these foods remind us of the resilience and creativity of the past. So, which of these dishes would you dare to try? Which one do you think should make a comeback? Share your thoughts in the comments, I would love to hear from you.